When I was a student, still training to be a minister and completing my year-long internship, my supervisor was helping me to prepare for the big interview and test that all Unitarian Universalist ministers are required to pass in order to receive fellowship, that is, to be allowed to serve a congregation. Fred, my supervisor, and later Hannah's intern supervisor too, asked me, "Why do you want to be a Unitarian Universalist minister?" And I said, no joke, because I'm easily bored. Fred told me in no uncertain terms that my answer needed to be a lot better than that. I needed to talk about calling and meaning making and connection with our shared principles and values. So I came up with a better answer for the interview committee, but the initial answer was still true, even though I learned not to say it in an interview. Ministry, and in particular Unitarian Universalist ministry, is non-stop. The tasks and skills required are varied to the point of ridiculousness. In the span of one day, I might be meeting with a staff person for supervision and two-way feedback, followed by a pastoral care visit with someone whose spouse was just diagnosed with a terminal illness. After that, I need to answer the emails about the upcoming environmental stewardship project that volunteers are coordinating, and why have I not responded to their emails yet? And also get the title and author of the centering reading for this Sunday to Cindy so she can put it in the order of service. And later that evening, I have a meeting with the fun team to make plans for the upcoming picnic. And oh, by the way, the sanctuary air conditioning isn't working. That's a calm day. If there are no crises, no pastoral care emergencies, no major technology transitions that we are trying to manage. Oh, and we also need to write a 15 to 20 minute sermon, and it needs to be meaningful. I am never, ever bored. I love that I get to use these skills: pastoral, prophetic, teaching, organizing, administrative, systemic, creative. But what I did not realize back when I was an intern is that it requires a lot of energy. Physical, mental, and spiritual, to constantly be pivoting between these things, attending deeply and authentically to the emotional and spiritual needs of a large group of people, creating enough space for thoughtful and creative sermon writing, also making sure that we ordered a new pump for the pond out front, and that website error gets fixed. Now, granted, when I was an intern, I was 25 and single and had no kids. So that might have had something to do with my energy supply. Even now, at night, when I lay my head on the pillow, after reading to my children and tucking them in bed, my brain is trying to sort through all the things that I did that day and I need to do tomorrow and next week and next month. And I know that Hannah is no different, though she is better than me at not checking her email when she's off. I'm learning. I am so glad that Hannah is taking a sabbatical. I'm glad because I took one a few years ago and it saved my ministry. I didn't even realize at the time how much burnout I was experiencing until I was allowed the space to rest, to set down the juggling act, to remember who I am and why I do this work in the first place. I am so glad that Hannah is taking a sabbatical because I feel so lucky that I get to be in ministry with such a kind, funny, smart, and deeply thoughtful person. And I want to keep doing that for as long as possible, so I don't want Hannah to burn out. And I also love that Hannah is taking a sabbatical because it gives me and all of us a chance to recalibrate too. Just like Hannah will be rediscovering who she is apart from the fellowship, we will be rediscovering who we are apart from Hannah's particular ministry. We'll be trying some new things, doing stuff a little differently, experiencing the leadership of some other people. And when she comes back, we will all be better for the space that sabbatical provides. The fellowship has been gifted with longevity in ministry. We've had long-serving ministers who provide stability and growth, which is such a gift. I don't remember the current statistics, but I think an average UU ministry at any given setting is under 5 years. Reverend Roger was here for 25. Reverend Leah served here for 9. I've been here just almost 9 years already. The shadow side of ministerial longevity, though, is that the congregation sort of melds with the particular minister. It becomes that much harder to adjust when a new minister comes along. By letting your ministers take regular sabbaticals every 4 or 5 years, you are helping to keep our fellowship flexible and continually reminding ourselves who we are, how we serve and lead and follow, how we are together in community apart from one specific minister. And as they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So my hope for Hannah's sabbatical is that not only does she come back refreshed and renewed for this always on, never boring work, but that we too are refreshed and renewed in our shared ministries.
In December of 2014, I was living in Baltimore, and I loved commuting around the city by bike whenever possible. And we were just, I think, fiancés then, but through my now wife, Catherine's involvement in local bicycle advocacy in Baltimore, I got to see the community that local cyclists had with each other. And that network of folks was pretty tight-knit, so word traveled quickly that local software engineer, bike builder, and father of 2 young children, Tom Palermo, had been hit and killed while riding his bike in a bike lane in the city a few days after Christmas. And any death of a pedestrian or cyclist hit by a car is tragic. But soon, the details surrounding the crash began to come out, and it made my stomach sink. The person who had been driving the car that hit him and then fled the scene was under the influence of alcohol at the time of the crash and had a blood alcohol level of 0.22, which is more than twice the legal limit. Yeah. And then the identity of the person who had been driving was released. Her name was Heather Cook, and she was the bishop suffragan, which is the second-ranking bishop for the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. Right, she was the second highest-ranking Episcopal official in the entire state. I was in seminary at the time, learning how important it was for clergy to seek support, to engage in self-care, and to remain accountable to colleagues. I was naively aghast that someone in her role could behave so recklessly. Weren't we supposed to hold ourselves to a higher standard? And then additional reporting revealed a deeper and sadder truth, that Cook had long struggled with alcohol abuse, and that she had a prior arrest for driving under the influence, and that other clergy in the diocese had suppressed that information during her election as bishop earlier that year. Publicly, she was celebrated as the first woman in the Diocese of Maryland to be elected as bishop, while privately her colleagues knew that she was struggling. As I gathered with hundreds of other cyclists for the memorial ride for Tom Palermo to place a ghost bike, which for those of you who aren't familiar, in the cycling community, it's tradition that when someone is killed in an accident, a bike that has been painted all white, called a ghost bike, is placed at the site of the crash. So hundreds of us were gathered for the memorial ride where the ghost bike would be placed, and we met in the parking lot of the Cathedral of the Incarnation at the invitation of the Episcopal Diocese. And I looked up uneasily at the imposing building next to us. and I wondered. I wondered how many other clergy were struggling silently, or only having their addiction or mental health addressed when it interfered with their ability to deliver the work. Or the most cynical part of me wondered if the church would only invest in addressing those struggles when it interfered with the church's public image. It was a moment of clarification for me that in ministry, my commitment to take care of myself would A, be an uphill battle, and B, was genuinely a matter of life and death. And you might think, wow, that's a little extreme, Hannah, to phrase it as a matter of life and death. Cut the drama. But it's not really that dramatic to suggest that, because the data about clergy wellness it's not great out there in that data. Here is what I think of as some unfun facts that the clergy coaching organization LeaderWise has shared. Right, if you look at a variety of data that they started collecting in the 1980s about how people in different careers rate the meaningfulness of their work, depending on which data set you look at, somewhere between 90 and 98% of clergy rate their work as meaningful or very meaningful. We are winning that category. And decades of research also show that clergy lead in higher rates of serious illness compared to the regular population, including but not limited to asthma, diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, and other serious mental health concerns. One team of researchers examining these issues for clergy said in their report, quote, "Serving in the ministry poses an occupational risk to mental health." And Matt Bloom, who is a person who has studied thousands of clergy, that's a job you can have, apparently. You can just learn about us. He put it this way, quote, "Pastoral work is not only tough, it may also be dangerous," close quote. Right? And the danger comes in part because of how fulfilling this work is. It makes it easy for clergy to downplay the struggle. And it feeds into a culture where clergy often struggle in private, succeed in public, and that it is often our individual health and the well-being of our families that bear the brunt. But when I think back to looking up at that cathedral as we gathered for the memorial ride, it makes me wonder, in the end, who really benefits from a culture where clergy, or anyone for that matter, is supposed to struggle in private while they succeed in the public eye? Because the truth is that none of us benefit from the urge to make struggle something that only happens behind closed doors. And one of the tricky parts of this role is that in order to show up as your minister, I need to bring my whole authentic self, vulnerable, real, and human. And in this role, I also cannot ask you to become responsible for taking care of me, even though I need your help making it possible for me to take care of myself. And I'm grateful because this congregation does that well. Right? You compensate appropriately, you contribute to the premium for health insurance that is decent, considering the world we all live in, and you don't call at weird times unless it's an emergency. This is no small set of mercies. You all are amazing. Thank you. And for the last 9 years, right, serving here and then previously for 5 years as the minister at the UU Church in Cheyenne, Wyoming, I've served in smaller communities where there is no reasonable expectation on any day of the week of leaving my house and not seeing some of your lovely faces. And this intimacy and sense of being deeply embedded in community is such a gift, truly. I am so grateful that I get to do ministry that isn't abstract or about some imagined sense of togetherness. Our lives are interconnected. And you all have so generously and thoughtfully welcomed me into this shared ministry and this local community. Count me among the many, many clergy who say that their work is deeply meaningful. And the visibility that is inherent in the role, compounded by serving a large church in a small city, and the additional visibility as one of a small number of out queer clergy serving a local congregation, though we've recently had a big uptick, I will say. The minister at Zion Lutheran and All Saints Episcopal, they're both gay men, they're new, I'm very excited. We're taking over. Yes. Which, right, I'm grateful that at least here in the Fox Valley, I get to be one of a handful instead of the case in Cheyenne, where I was the only out queer clergy person in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I was one of only 4 in the whole state. Yeah. Right? That there's ways that is such a gift. It's an enormous privilege to represent this congregation wherever I go as a living, breathing example of this congregation's commitment to LGBTQ inclusion. On the other hand, it can also be a lot of pressure to show up a certain way sometimes. And especially over the last year or two, as the queer community has come under such assault from the federal government, I have wondered what it would feel like to live a private queer life instead of a public one. And to be clear, I am deliriously happy in my role here and the choices I have made in it. But as I prepare to step back from it for the next 4 months of sabbatical, I've realized that sometimes the complexities are invisible to you all. And while I don't need you to be the ones to take care of me, it's important to me to cultivate a culture here, where it's normal to talk about the fact that every person deserves time and space to take care of themselves and to let those closest to them take care of them as well. And that we should talk about what it really takes to care for ourselves before there is some kind of crisis. And I hope that by sharing that, you can receive some corollary truths. That you deserve time and space for care. That your need for care is not a burden. Yes, even if you need complex care. Yes, even if your need for care or your commitment to care for others means you cannot do paid work right now, or maybe ever. Yes, even if you have made mistakes and been otherwise human. Yes, without qualification, your need for care is not a burden. And if your needs feel burdensome, it's probably because of the lies that powerful people have peddled about how human purpose is for productivity and profit. And I hope, most of all, we receive this truth of universalism, that our interdependence, our purpose-built need for one another is a gift. It's not always easy, but it's a gift. Right? And like Christina said, this sabbatical is not only my opportunity to care for myself, but your opportunity to care for one another and this congregation. And so I have 2 particular invitations for how I hope you might show up over these next 4 months. First, I hope you keep your hearts open. This will be a growing experience for both of us. I won't return the same minister that's here today. I'm going to learn things, write things, read things, go places, and if I can find a way to fit it in, maybe get some new tattoos. And I hope that you all do the same. Maybe the tattoos. But mostly, I hope that you experience new things. That this time isn't a holding pattern, but a chance to try out new preachers, new hymns, new ways of community organizing, new auction items. And the second invitation I have is for you to stay curious. Remember a moment ago when I said that our interdependence is a gift, but not easy? Yeah, keeping our hearts open means that they will be stretched and tested and sometimes bruised and broken. And here's a subplot of this invitation to curiosity. It's a big election year here in Wisconsin, with competitive primaries for governor, among other offices, and important issues at stake. And sometimes we imagine that the fellowship is a place where everyone shares the same political views. This is not true. And I don't mean that in a, like, Trump voters should feel welcome to be hateful here way. I mean that in the portion of the political spectrum that runs from centrist Democrats to nonviolent anarchists is still pretty dang broad way, right? Like there's a lot going on in there. And what a gift it is to be part of a community that says we can act collectively and collaboratively to assert our values in public while not requiring a particular political affiliation, and in fact valuing a plurality of ideas. And I hope that our curiosity allows this to be a place where we can meet one another in that space and allow that encounter to change us a little. And instead of thinking, what? Huh? When you hear a fellow congregant's choice for governor or whatever, which I do see how you interact with each other on social media sometimes. Like Santa Claus, I am always watching, just kidding. But that here at the fellowship, I hope that instead of saying, what? When we hear someone who has a different approach to the political conversation of the day, that maybe we can ask, who? As in, who is this person, this fellow congregant of mine? Do I know what they care about? Do I know what matters to them? And how? As in, how can I learn from them? How can this conversation deepen our relationship rather than create distance? Deepening our ability to be in relationship means deepening our ability to care for one another, which means deepening our ability to acknowledge that we need care. Deepening our relationships means creating a culture where we struggle together, honestly, compassionately, and with our hearts wide open. May it be so. Amen. Yours.